Definitely
Makes total sense.
But to your point, CoPilot was better able to do that sort of once you had the meat of the crawler together, and then you were like,
Yeah,
all
once the
right, these
crawler
are
was once the crawler was
yeah,
working, like
yeah,
it just refactored it for me.
awesome, super cool, yep. And yeah, that makes sense. That gels with my experience as well. And then we can also have all kinds of holy wars around the fact that I use a CoPilot competitor called Codium right now. So we don't need to get into that. That's not on this machine. Very, very controversial. But more importantly, so okay, great. So we have a crawler. The crawler allows us to go to web pages, as you said, spider them, also extract semantic meaning by way of their HTML markup. And then what? What do we do with all that stuff that we're
Okay,
getting
so
back
if we
when we're
go to
crawling?
if we go to seed,
Yeah.
so seed is actually the bit that will take that crawl to like we'll give it you give it a URL, right? Like it's basically wraps this crawler. Give it a
Yeah.
URL, you give it some limit, right? You give it an index where you want to put the stuff in, right? And then you give it like 3 other things which are under options, right? And this is what you see as seed options, right? Like you're giving a splitting method, you give it a chunk size, and you give it a chunk overlap, right?
Okay.
So should probably by the way, these chunk size and chunk overlap should be optional. But
First,
if you change it now, you won't be able to. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Basically what it does is that it instantiates the crawler, right? So now it gets the pages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see in the UI you're able to choose which kind of splitter you want to use. If you want to use a document splitter, if you want to use a recursive splitter, or if you want to use a markdown splitter, and it will just basically use the appropriate splitter based on your choice, right?
Okay.
And that will give you split documents, right? And then it will create the index, and then iterate over these documents that it created, and create embeddings for them. So you see, like I have in line 9, right? Documents.flat. So like it's like a list of flat documents, and then and I map over them, and for each one of them I call embedDocument, right? And embedDocument is another function in this page, in this file,
which I can handily jump to with my language definition rel on the right, because
amazing
NeoVim.
amazing.
I'd like to see VsCode do something like that. Just kidding.
Okay.
Just kidding.
I'll remember to show you that.
Yeah. Actually, there is one thing that I think we might have just quickly, not to get into too far into the nitty gritty, and you were talking about, it made sense to me that you're talking about, everyone's got kind of just whatever worked for them in terms of their splitting size and dimensions. But roughly speaking, like, why do we want to split documents if we're going to deal with a vector database? Like, what does that achieve for us, really?
Right. So we have to think about like how we're querying and what we're going to query, right? So I'm going to want to ask the bot eventually, right, some question about a document, right? And the way that I would like it to answer that, right, is by, again, like we want to inject highly relevant content to like the prompt, right? And then respond based on that content. Now, if I took the entire document, right, then I have a couple of problems, right? Number one, like it might not fit in what's called the context window, because there's like a limit to the size of the context window, right?
Yep.
Like even if it does fit and we have a big context window, there have been papers that show that basically the ability of the LLM to actually respond correctly goes down, right? Pretty much right after the beginning of that context window, right? So like even if I could fit it, I don't have some real assurances that it's going to pay enough attention to that information that's stored in that context window. And so I want to like really limit myself on semantically relevant content, right, that would fit in that window. Okay. Now,
Gotcha.
when I want to do that, right, like I want to be able to point to segments within that document, right, that are actually contextually relevant, right? So if I use really big segments, right, I could potentially hit segments that might not be very relevant, but they will still be hit, right? Because they contain, right, like some semantic relevance, right, to the thing that I'm asking about, right? The
Yep.
smaller I make them, right, the higher likelihood that number one, I won't like number one, I will not hit segments that are not relevant, right?
Yep.
And B, that when I do hit a segment, it will be highly relevant, right? So like it
Yep.
kind of like clears out the noise, right, and gives me
Hmm.
a more likelihood that when it does hit something, that thing will actually be relevant and contain semantically relevant information. Now, I don't want it to be too small, right, because then there's not going to be any kind of added value, right, to the thing
Right.
that I found, right? So there's
If
like
it's a
some,
few, 3 or 4 words that a character said, for example, but
right,
not the scene, like,
right,
it's
right.
not enough for the LLM to actually return a generative answer that we would recognize as like, oh, wow, that's 100% spot on. Right.
Right, right. That you've
Got it.
actually added some value, right, to my question, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, like the assumption is that like there's going to be a piece of information that's relevant to a question, right, in some vicinity to the actual question, like where the question could be semantically referred to in the text, right? That's the assumption, and
Got
it
it.
usually works, right? And
Yep.
so
Definitely.
like you want to make sure that like that's kind of like the main reason for wanting to break these documents apart.
Awesome. And then, like you said, it sort of goes back to it's about getting the right granularity, and then it's sort of a tweaking game depending on your actual use case, what you're embedding, et cetera. And so there might be some experimentation that folks could expect to do. And at least today, that's just the normal part of developing these kinds of applications, right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So now we've got documents
Cool. So yeah, so we
and
have
we've got vectors.
documents, we got vectors, and then we are basically just what we're doing what's called a chunked upsert, right? So we can have
Okay.
like multiple vectors, and there's like a limit to how many vectors you can upsert in any given operation, upsert
Mhm.
operation.
Okay.
And to just like help you forget about that, you just give us all you give this operation all the vectors, and it will just take care of all of this for you without you have to care about it. This is like a helper function I wrote to like add it to the client when I was just annoyed of having to do this over and over and over and over and again. It's just like in a small util library that comes with the Node SDK, and
Awesome.
unfortunately
Great.
doesn't exist in Python. But maybe if some dev advocate who loves Python wants to do that and fight that fight.
Like a NeoVim user, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay, cool. That makes sense. So now at that point, what we've got is we've done the crawling, we've fetched the information, we've chunked it in a way that makes sense, we've turned it into vectors, and we've upserted those vectors. And so now our Pinecone database is nicely populated with relevant documents that can add value to an LLM generation task, and they are also importantly, semantically available to nearest neighbor searches, et cetera, for future queries, essentially.
And so if you
Okay.
go to the chat endpoint now,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that at this point I already added this, right? So like now, like we're getting the context, right? So like that's that function that we wrote before that goes and gets the context based on the user's last message, and gets
Mm-hmm.
and that basically goes and queries the database, blah blah blah. So now we already have stuff in there, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
crawled it. What we do with that is we basically just add that to the prompt, right? I added it here to the system prompt.
Yep.
It might not matter. It might matter. Like you can play around with it, whether you want to
Yep.
add it as like a
I
system
actually
AI prompt
I
or
wanted to
whatever.
ask you about this because when I first read the code and I saw that you'd done it this way, I found this super interesting, and I was wondering if there was a particular reason you put it in the center. I have also experimented with I've noticed that like if I'm asking an LLM like ChatGPT, I want you to help me with this particular task. I'm about to give you X source of something, and then I'll say something like X source follows these characters, and then I put like a horizontal line or backticks or something. But I thought it was interesting that you wrote the prompt this way, and it seems to work pretty well, right?
It seems to work pretty well because I don't think it matters. That's the
Okay.
bottom line. Like, I think
Yeah.
that like as long as like it's easily identifiable within the text, then
Hmm.
it's going to use it, right?
Okay.
Because it's again like it's going to be there. It's part of like that context, right? Like
Yeah.
it
And you're giving
it's
super
kind of
clear
the
instructions about what to
right.
do with it.
Right. And it's like it would be interesting to see if there's like a measurable, and this is the keyword here, measurable difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Between moving that line to be above the start of the context block or under the start I mean, I don't know. It
Yeah.
to me, like, prompt engineering has been and always will be a voodoo magic kind of situation until someone
Mhm.
knows how to like start measuring these things, and we get like clear like guidance on how to measure the performance of LLMs in that context, but we don't
Definitely.
right now.
Right. And
That
also just to tie this back super quickly to something we mentioned at the beginning of the stream, like literally here on this line of code, essentially we're almost completing the round trip of the retrieval augmented generation, right? Because what we've
Yep.
done is we've now, like we said, Pinecone database is set up. It's got really like relevant external additional information. We can query for that semantically. And then at a runtime, if you will, or at generation time, we're providing that context to the LLM. And now because the LLM has that context and it's able to return what we would consider a more accurate or more performant answer, essentially.
Yep.
It's also worth mentioning that, like I'll ask you, like how much, once you added like this, once you had the whole Pinecone integration piece working, like how much latency does that actually add to the overall application?
It's not significant at all.
Yep.
I mean, it like so like generating the embeddings is on the order of like hundreds of milliseconds,
Yep.
and then fetching the results is like on the order of 100 milliseconds, and like the generation is the same because it's just streamed back anyway, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I mean, it is slightly slower, but it's not. It's
Sure.
like within the context of an LLM as we know them to be right now. It's not significant, right?
Right. And the trade-off is that you're getting back such a more accurate, grounded in facts, domain specific answer that, even if it were 1 second, which in many cases, like I've experienced the same thing when I build an app and then I do the full retrieval augmented generation through LangChain, and
Right.
maybe there's like a perceptible like, oh, I think it was like maybe a half a second longer.
Mm-hmm.
However, what you're actually getting back is so excellent that it's a trade-off that you should kind of, I think most folks these days are willing to make, essentially. And so that's what makes the retrieval augmented generation such an effective pattern, at least for now. And as you mentioned, like for the LLMs as we know them currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it's interesting to note that LLMs and like ChatGPT and like others, Bard and blah blah blah, kind of like conditioned us to be okay with like responses taking. I mean, technically they are pretty slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
like for a response to be complete, right? You're
Yep.
waiting there for like a minute, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you're fine because like there's like streaming
It's did
stuff
30 minutes of work for you.
coming in, right? But also like but it's also like less perceptible. I don't know about if you know about this, but like there's been like this I can't remember which airline did this, but like it's like a famous kind of story about user experience
Mm-hmm.
where like this airline had like lots of complaints because you know like uh, luggage would take like a long time to get into the luggage area or whatever
The
after
baggage
landing
claim.
to baggage
Yeah.
claim after
Yeah.
landing. And like customers were complaining, and like it was like a really bad problem, and like they spent like hundreds of millions of dollars trying to solve the problem, kind of to optimizing blah blah blah. Nothing helped until they decided to just like move move the gate 20 minutes away by like a 20-minute walk, right, from baggage claim.
Uh-huh.
And complaints just plummeted because
Okay.
instead of waiting, you're walking. You know what I mean? So like you're occupied, right? And I feel like a lot of the same experience is happening with LLMs, where like you're not just sitting there, right? Like there's something happening, right? There's not even just a loading thing, right? Like you're getting new information, like constantly being drip into your brain, right? So you're
Yep.
like, okay, so like this thing is actually doing the thing and it's actually responding to me already, right? And
Yeah.
so like I feel like that in and of itself like kind of like takes care of a lot of like these worries about latency and slowness and all of that.
So that's such a great point, and then it also just underscores and kind of highlights yet again the importance and the awesomeness of getting that streaming utility out of that library that we just looked at, like 20 minutes
100%.
ago, sort of
100%.
available in an SDK call. Like it's a big deal because like otherwise everyone would have to figure out like how do I do that and make sure that it happens, because otherwise you're sitting there and waiting on a 45-second API response, which I thought where you started going, that story is super fascinating, by the way. I thought you were
I have to
referencing.
find the airline that did it.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to know. I can't remember where this came from either, but there's some tolerable number of milliseconds on a typical UX page after which most users will assume the page is dead. Like if you click a button and you don't get something back within like roughly like it's like a second or second and a half or something, most humans are like, oh, this is broken. I'm out. I don't even want to wait for it.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, super interesting. Okay, cool. So essentially, at this point, what we're really doing here is then handing all of this good stuff, the prompt, the cell
that doesn't
itself,
change at all, right?
Yeah,
It's just
and then we're just
now that we're
saying, can you
rejecting the
complete
context.
exactly? Yep.
So like
And
the
can you
one
complete
thing that is still interesting to talk about in the app, right, is okay, so now you have your chunks, right? You have the bot and it's completing the thing and it's getting the context and all that. But this is I think the strength of vector databases, right? And why they're so important. You don't just get that, right? Like you also, because you are the one who created these chunks in the first place, embedded those chunks in the first place, you have this opportunity to associate these chunks with whatever metadata you want, right? Like, and the metadata is in your control, right? And so we can create the context endpoint here. If you click on that and you'll open it, you'll see it's like literally the same get context function, right? Exactly the same get context function, but I'm specifying here that I don't want to get text only, right? And this will give me back the scored vectors, right? At like including all of the metadata that's associated with them. And the reason why that's important, and I think we might have to like go forward and maybe you could just like go all the way to the last commit.
Okay.
If you go to components, no, yeah, go to context index. Yep, you almost had it. Yep. So under components, context.
Oh, gotcha.
Index.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So go down. Too fast. A little bit slower. This is not interesting. These are just the buttons to click on the URLs. And these are the drop downs. Not interesting. Cards. Oh, there we go. Okay. So see here, I have like these cards are essentially just like what's going to show all of the segments, all the chunks within the document.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm going to have this selected property on them, right? So if they're selected, they're going to be highlighted. So if you can track where selected is defined, this one, it's actually going to be it's actually passed to the context. Okay, cool. What? Wait, what? Oh, because it's an array. Okay, cool. So this is like basically like I'm passing in an array of IDs, right? Of the things that are actually selected, and those are going to be in our context, right? So basically, what happens is, maybe go to index, the top level index, the top, like I guess it's in page. It's called. What is it called?
This is if it's gonna be app index, right?
Yeah, it's page TSX.
Oh, I see it.
So there's a couple of methods here. Scroll down. There's a use effect. Here it is. In line 4. I guess it's not 4. It's whatever. Right. I forgot about your silly. Jesus.
Use effect.
Right. Yes. So this
Okay.
use effect basically does the following, right? Like when it gets a message, right? A new message comes in, it goes to call that context endpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
it updates the this context, right, with the selected IDs, right, with the IDs of like the endpoint of the chunks, right, that get context gives you back, right? So what does that mean? User asked a question, a bunch of chunks within the data that we embedded, right, were found,
Mm-hmm.
right, to be the most relevant, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they were injected into the prompt, right? But their
Mm-hmm.
IDs were also sent back to the front end, right? So now the front end could tell you exactly which segments were used to build the response that the LLM gave,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm no longer in the dark about like why did the LLM answer the way that it did. I know
Yeah.
exactly why, because I know what hits, right? What makes that LLM quote unquote tick, right?
Let's to make it a little bit concrete for folks that maybe never heard about this before. Maybe we could imagine sticking with the airline example that we're doing like a booking system where we've got customer records, for example. Like, what kind of metadata would you expect to have when you associated with these vectors, basically? Or a different example if you've got one that's better, maybe.
No, let's stick with like a well, I don't know if because the thing about user data is a little bit weird. But no, like let's imagine that you have users, right?
Okay.
And you're building a recommender system, for example, right? And so you have like you want to know why like something was recommended, right? So like one of the things that you would have, right, is like whenever a user makes a choice, right, that would be an embedding, right? So like that
Mm-hmm.
content will be embedded, right? But I would have a URL, right, that would be associated with the embedded. So like I know what you read, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that that metadata again like helps me say that when I give you back a recommendation based on these embeddings, right, it's not
Mm-hmm.
just the embeddings, right? Like it's the embeddings and the URLs associated because you read this, and that, right? Now I can tell you that this is going to be the next thing that I recommend for you to read, right?
Awesome. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And to your point about like, this is a big deal because especially as we sort of expect, if you will, at least Gen AI applications or AI in general to continue proliferating throughout society. Auditability is going to become a big deal, not just for developers who need to get in there and figure out why isn't this system returning the types of queries that we want it
Exactly.
to, but also as we try and tackle serious problems in AI such as bias, like why did you make this recommendation? What sources were you reading?
Right.
What did you look at, etc.
Right.
So
Right.
having the sources and asking the Gen AI application, when you perform this work for me, I also want you to cite your sources, is a pretty big deal. Right.
For sure. For sure.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to like conclude this with like looking at the actual app.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Cool. So we can start by basically asking a question about like one of these topics
Mm-hmm.
before we index. Although, actually, can you do me a favor and just click
Yeah,
clear index so that it's actually clear?
absolutely. Is it supposed to kill this or?
Maybe it's not supposed to do anything. Okay, well, let's try it. Can you say like, wait, I'm gonna move you a little bit here.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
you're like not in the way somehow. I'm gonna make you smaller.
If only I were so light and easy to move in real life, that would be amazing.
There we go. Put you here. Okay, so let's say like maybe you can ask something like, tell me about solar power and something more specific. Yeah, tell me about solar power in India in 2023.
And did you say 2024?
Three.
2023. Okay.
Zach, I don't know if you know, but 2024 didn't happen yet.
Well, it depends on when you're watching the stream, my good man.
Okay, so annoyingly, it knows too much about it.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe we could do something like, can you compare solar power in India versus China in 2023? God damn it! Something in the model changed because it used to not be able to answer these type of questions. Okay, let's try something else.
One question I have is okay, yeah.
Go ahead. No.
Well, just is this button supposed to be to give feedback on click or something?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I should have done that.
There's
fine. This Matisse Tibule, whatever his name is. You can ask a question like, how much did he like that name? I'm not going to pronounce it again because it's horrible. Signed his contract for or something. I don't know. In 2023.
Okay. Is this a sports person or?
Yeah, sports person.
Okay.
Please don't know.
Okay.
There we go.
Nice.
Thank you.
There we go. So this is an example of when we would trip.
Yes.
The base example.
Yeah, the base example. I don't know what happened to GPT-4 that now knows about stuff between China and India in 2023. It didn't used to.
It knows that you're doing a live demo. It's the law of live demos. It knew that you're trying to show something.
Exactly. Okay, so click on that dude's name, and that's gonna fetch an index. Okay, and now we have all of our scroll down. We have a lot of segments here. Scroll down, more down. Because there's some content in there, right? As you can as you saw, right, and like a lot of noise, right? Try asking a question again. I think it has that particular answer.
Look at that.
Look at that.
That is pretty cool. That is RAG or Retrieval Augmented Generation in effect. Yep.
In effect. And the nice thing is that, again, it lighted up for us, right? Like the portions that are relevant, right?
Got you. That's hence the mapping, and make sure I get the IDs out so that I can actually give them the class to say that they're highlighted in the front end.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Man, Next.js is a lot of fun. I mean, once you actually can code in JavaScript at your level, then it's a lot of fun. But now, luckily, everyone's closer to doing that with AI coding assistance.
Thanks, Denova.
Super cool. Do we still have 3 people with us on the stream?
Yeah, Zenova's stuck with us the entire time. I'm kind of
That's
shocked.
Amazing. Where now I'm really curious to know where Zenova streams so I can watch your stuff.
Zenova is like I told you, like you should come to our Thursday Eye. He comes to Thursday Eye every Thursday.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And
yeah, I'll try that. I've never.
So we can hang with him.
I'm old enough that I don't even know what Twitter's faces are. admit that on stream.
Except for you do.
I assume it's some sort of live. Was it used to be Periscope or something, or
It used to
is it like that?
be, I guess, like it's
Okay.
kind of like a Clubhouse
Okay.
competitor type
Okay.
situation.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is a really cool app. And so, and then meaningfully too, we'll close out by saying that all of this that we talked about here is it's open source. If you wanted to read through it and understand it better, learn these techniques or how the code works. If you want to fork it or clone it and make a slight difference, if you wanted to put your own logo here and do something similar or turn it into a different app, you can, because it's a template, and it will also deploy nicely to Vercel so that you can have it live on the internet for your friends and your coworkers to play with as well. So, and so yeah, that was the main thrust of, I think, what we wanted to get through on the stream today. Super fun. We also
our inaugural stream.
Inaugural Pinecone Vercel
I can
stream.
see so many like fights over NeoVim in our future, dude. I'm so
Oh yeah,
excited.
I can't wait.
I'm
excited to be quite honest. I really kid. I mean, I enjoy NeoVim. It's I used to use just pure Vim on Linux and Ubuntu, but now I've got a Mac, and I'm going to set up.
Do you still have to like know all of like the keyboard shortcuts and whatnot?
Oh yeah,
be effective. Okay, so the worst parts of it are still there.
Yeah, that's definitely.
They made
but
sure
I
to
also
let go of that.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's the fun part. I mean, I don't know if it's like my whole life being a hardcore gamer that's sort of just like, oh yeah, I'll just memorize this other like control scheme, and then sometimes it's less and less as I get older and I don't have time for it anymore. But I can still pick up a controller from like a game 13 years ago and be like, oh yeah, I remember how to do this. Like, but I'm definitely by no means one of the master Vimmers out there. But I will be setting up VsCode on my Mac, and then I'm really curious to check out Cursor, which I know our other DevRel or Dev Advocate teammate uses, and that's like VsCode. I think it's base VsCode with a special AI assistant baked into it, right?
Yeah.
So we can.
I should try it out too.
The next 4-hour stream that I do will be after I get through the video issues. Will literally just be me trying to remember how to set up DevTools on an OSX, because I tried to. I was like, literally just trying to get my YubiKey working over there so I could do my normal Git commit signing flow, and I went to go run it. It's like, you don't have Java even yet, and I was like, oh, God, here we go. Like, okay.
Do you want to do so like I think that our next one we should talk about what it will be, but I'm going to do it here on air. We could do one like, because like I just finished this, and Zenova also just beat me to the punch and released the post about image search. So he did semantic image search, which is cool. So like you're searching with like actual text for images, whatever.
Yeah.
But I made a little Pokemon image search example in JavaScript that I want to show off. So like maybe we can do that for the
love that.
for our next stream, which should
I would absolutely
be
love
like
that, and we can actually
soon.
I'm down for that, and I can actually bring some shade depending on how you've handled the different Pokemon classes, and like whether or not you have correctly typed Mewtwo as a psychic, for example.
I will I'll tell you that my knowledge of Pokemon is non-existent.
Okay, Roie. So first of all, there's no NeoVim. There's no Vim. And now you're misclassifying Pokemon. So maybe one of the pull requests will be to get the classification engine working correctly for Pokemon. But that sounds super cool. I would love to do that for sure.
Yeah, sweet. All right, dude.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Roie for building this and then for talking us through it.
Our first and
thank you, our champion, for helping us so much.
Crowd. Thanks for
yes, really appreciate that. Definitely.
This was super fun. All right.
Yep, it was fun. All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye.